Deadly prison riots force a state of emergency in Ecuador's penitentiary system.
Dozens of prison inmates were killed during a riot early on Monday in Ecuador.
The death toll from prison riots at one of Ecuador's largest penitentiaries has risen to over 100 people, including a number of beheadings.
At the end of the 2000s, Ecuador was in the grips of rising street gang activity and the violence that came with it. According to the national police, more than 400 gangs were operating in the Guayas province, home to the country's second city and primary port, Guayaquil. The Latin kings were thought to be responsible for a quarter of the city's homicides in those years. Juvenile arrests spiked as the authorities sought to aggressively combat the trend. However, in 2007, the country's approach to gangs took a dramatic turn. It began to legalize them. The Latin Kings became the first gang to be formally recognized as an urban youth group by the state. Following legalization, the homicide rate in Ecuador went down from 15.35 murders per 100,000 people in 2011 to about 5 in 2017. Approaching the rate of countries such as Argentina, Ecuador had been a success story in regards to lowering international homicide rates, being able to have rates reduced between 2010 and 2018. The success story, however, came to a halt in 2021, where the rates of violence spiked due to fighting between gangs for control of the Latin American drug trade. During the year, 206 tons of cocaine were seized by the Ecuadorian police, of which 96 were seized in Guayaquil. Ecuador is located in between two of the largest producers of Colombia and Peru, making it ideal for drug traffickers to use. The fact that Ecuador uses the US dollar as a currency has also provided criminals an opportunity for money laundering. Drugs from Colombia follow several trafficking routes along Ecuador's coast, where fishing boats, low-profile vessels, and planes at clandestine airstrips are used to move the drugs up the coast towards Central America and the United States. This has led to several seizures off the coast of Costa Rica, where drugs are often left attached to GPS buoys for the next group in the drug supply chain to pick up and take further north. Other routes take the drugs to the largest port in the country, Guayaquil, where the drugs are loaded onto container ships heading for North America, Europe, and Asia, among others. This has led to levels of corruption amongst dock workers and custom officials to forge papers and load the drugs onto containers loaded with legal goods. The importance of the port of Guayaquil for the shipping of large quantities of drugs has led to fighting between drug gangs for control of the territory. Trafficking of drugs has also led to maritime crime, where criminals hijack fishing vessels or board container ships underway to smuggle the drugs on board. The high rates of violence between gangs in Ecuador has been linked to the involvement of foreign criminal groups, primarily from the Mexican cartels, including the Sinaloa cartel and Jalisco Nueva Generation cartel. Reporting suggests that these Mexican cartels have aligned themselves with the Ecuadorian gangs to control the flow of drugs in Ecuador through its ports and airstrips, creating a proxy conflict. Those involved in Ecuador are the Choneros, reportedly backed by the Sinaloa cartel, and its rival gangs such as the Chone Killers, Lobos, and Lagartos, among others, backed by the Jalisco Nueva Generation cartel. Considering the level of violence in Mexico due to cartel violence, authorities are worried that the situation in Ecuador will get significantly worse. The extent to which Mexican cartels control or support local Ecuadorian gangs is not entirely clear, but several incidents over the years have given snippets of information. During the trial of Sinaloa cartel leader Joaquin El Chapo Guzman in 2018, information came out about an Ecuadorian army captain, Telmo Castro. He had facilitated the shipment of drugs from Esmeralda to Quito and finally to Guayaquil. Castro had been arrested in 2013, but later re-arrested in 2018 and killed in prison in 2019. To a lesser extent, Ecuador has seen criminals involved in the drug trade from other countries be active in the country. Most recently, on 22nd January 2022, an Albanian national was shot and killed in Guayaquil. The victim was said to be linked to the drug trade according to Albanian media. presence of European criminals in countries like Ecuador, as well as Colombia, shows the extent of the links that local gangs have. Whilst Guayaquil is the epicenter of violence in Ecuador, additional security threats are faced, including on the northern border with Colombia, where historically Colombian armed groups have operated drug operations and camps to get away from the Colombian authorities. Border provinces saw significant violence in 2018, which included a car bomb detonated outside the police station in San Lorenzo, province of Esmeralda, by FARC dissidents, injuring 28 people. Such acts of violence have not taken place since, but attacks on authorities, high rates of homicide, kidnappings, and arrests of Colombian nationals trafficking weapons and drugs are all continuing to be reported. On 14th February 2021, 2 bodies were discovered hanging from a pedestrian bridge over a major road in a neighborhood outside Guayaquil. Durán, the suburb outside Guayaquil where the body was found, has been plagued by violence, worried by shootings in broad daylight and the discovery of at least 5 decapitated heads since November 2021. The rising violence stems from a combination of factors. Because Ecuador closed its ports for long periods of time during the pandemic, the drugs had nowhere to go. They're finally being shipped, heightening the violence. There is so much more that needs to be exported, and the drug cartels are fighting for control. The number of murders in Ecuador rose more than 80% in 2021 to 2,494, up from 1,371 in 2020. Part of the spike reflects an epidemic of violence in the country's prisons that have killed more than 300 inmates. Rival gangs seeking control and dominance have fueled the violence in the prison system. The Chone Killer Gang, led by Benjamin Camacho, known as Ben 10, were an armed wing of the Choneros gang until they turned on the group in 2021. On 23 February 2021, 79 inmates were killed and several others were injured in the riots that took place simultaneously in 4 prisons. Authorities gave gang rivalry in an overcrowded prison system as the cause. The violence happened in prisons located in Guayas, Azuay, and Cotopaxi provinces, which contain nearly 70% of the total prison population in the country. According to officials, the riot began as several rival prison gangs were fighting for leadership as they clashed inside detention centers around the country. The fight for leadership began back in December 2021 when Jorge Luis Zambrano, leader of Los Choneros, the most powerful gang within Ecuadorian prisons, was murdered in a shopping mall in Manta a few months after being released. During his time in prison, he and his gang ran a lucrative smuggling, drug dealing, and extortion ring which mainly, but not exclusively, operates inside the prison system. The riots were reported to have been precipitated by weapon search carried out the day prior to the riots, where 2 firearms were seized from members of the Los Choneros. The police believed that the firearms were going to be used to kill the leaders of the other 4 prison gangs that had formed an alliance against the Los Choneros. News of the firearms seizures alerted rival gang members and they organized and launched coordinated attacks against the leaders of the Los Choneros in 4 different prisons. In Ecuador, inmates have access to guns, sometimes high caliber, and ammunition. The weapons enter prisons through delivery vehicles, drone deliveries, and officials have long been trying to prevent high-caliber weapons from entering the prisons over the wall. The fighting lasted for almost 8 hours. Videos circulating on social media showed bodies, some burnt, laying on the ground in the prison. Inmates tried to dynamite a wall to get into Pavilion 2 and carry out the massacre. They also burnt mattresses in an attempt to suffocate their rivals in smoke. Early reports confirmed that at least 50 inmates were killed following the violence. Photographs and videos were spread on social media which showed the inmates decapitated and dismembered in pools of blood. On February 24th, the death toll of the inmates increased to 79, the number being higher than the total of inmates killed in 2019 and 2020 combined. The deadliest incident happened in Turi prison in the city of Cuenca, where 34 were killed. There were also fatalities in 2 prisons in the city of Guayaquil and in the jail in Lutacunga. All of those killed were inmates. Ecuadorian President Lenin Moreno declared a temporary state of emergency in the prison system in order to control the violence. The September 2021 prison riot occurred in the Litoral Penitentiary in Guayaquil. At least 118 inmates were killed and several others injured in the riot that took place in that prison. It was the deadliest prison fight in the country's history and one of the deadliest in Latin American history. After the death of Jorge Luis Zambrano, leader of the Los Choneros gang, several groups that were previously part of the Los Choneros separated from the structure and began to attack their former leaders. These groups became the bands of Los Chone Killers, Los Lobos, Los Pipos, and Los Tiguerones. The confrontation that led to the massacre at the penitentiary occurred in response to a celebration of the birthday of one of the leaders of Los Choneros in one of the penitentiary's pavilions on the night of 24th September. Members of Los Choneros allegedly stated during the celebration that they were the most powerful gang inside the prison, which would have angered members of Los Lobos and Los Tiguerones gangs. The clashes between the gangs began at around 9:30 in the morning of September 28, when the first detonations of explosions were heard inside the jail, and it was decided to evacuate the administrative personnel working there. Inmates from Pavilions 8 and 9 entered Pavilion 5 and attacked their rivals, resulting in around 35 deaths and 48 injured. Members of Los Tiguerones gang also attacked inmates in Pavilions 1 and 3 and beheaded 5 of them. As a consequence of the first confrontation that occurred in the morning, another retaliatory attack took place. On 30 September, around 900 police and military personnel entered the Lichoa Penitentiary to pacify the prison. During their entry, the security forces found improvised checkpoints built by inmates and holes in walls, used by the attackers to enter other pavilions in search of victims. Relatives waited for news after police stormed the jail in Guayaquil where the deadly prison riot took place. Funeral workers looking for business smiled among anxious relatives. They had coffins at ready should they be needed. In November, the Lichoa Penitentiary in Guayaquil once again became a battleground for rival gangs. Another riot occurred on the 13th of November. 68 prisoners were killed and over a dozen were seriously injured during this riot. According to Ecuadorian police, the violence might have started as a consequence of the release of the leader of the Tiguerones gang after serving a part of his sentence for stealing car parts. Although Tiguerones controlled Pavilion 8, they were allies of Chone Killers, who controlled Pavilion 2, where the massacre took place. Signs of a riot were incoming as inmates had heard chatter the day before Pavilion 2 would be targeted. The attack was launched at 7 p.m. when prisoners from Pavilion 3, 6, and 12, all controlled by the Los Choneros gang, tried to enter Pavilion 2 of the prison, where 700 inmates were kept, by blowing holes in the walls with dynamite. The prisoners used machetes, guns, and explosive devices to kill their victims. Multiple fires were also set. By the end of the riot, 68 prisoners were killed and 25 were injured. As Pavilion 2 is a transitory facility where prisoners that have not been sentenced yet or who are appealing their sentences are housed, many of the victims were imprisoned for minor crimes. Among those killed was a trans woman who was housed in the men's jail, and Victor Hoyos, a human rights activist who was in prison since 2019. In 2022, the violence has not slowed down. On 3rd April, at least 20 inmates were killed during a riot inside El Churo prison in Cuenca, southern Ecuador. On May 9th, a fight between rival gangs, Los Lobos and R7 inside Bella Vista prison in Santo Domingo, central Ecuador, escalated into a full-scale riot that left at least 43 inmates dead and enabled more than 200 to escape. 112 prisoners were recaptured soon after. The remaining 108 inmates that escaped the prison during the riot are still at large. The incident was triggered by a brawl involving the transfer of an inmate known as Anchundia into the prison. He had been one of the ringleaders who had caused the previous prison riot in April. Pictures from outside the prison showed bloodied inmates being carried from trucks to waiting ambulances. As news of the riot spread throughout the community, many relatives gathered outside the facility, distraught and desperate for news. On July 18th, 13 inmates were killed and 2 more injured after a riot broke out again in Bella Vista prison. In Ecuador, the prisons are plagued by overcrowding of about 30% and poor living conditions for the system. There are about 40,000 inmates in its penitentiary system, which has a capacity to hold about 30,000. Of this total, 15,000 inmates have not been sentenced yet.